30 years after a whole generation was defined by peace, love, and music, some organizers tried to bring that magic back. But what they ended up with, well, it was a total cultural disaster. It was a perfect storm of bad decisions that literally ended in fire and riots. So how on earth did it go so incredibly wrong? Let's dive into the recipe for this infamous festival. So on one hand, you have the dream, right? This iconic image of Woodstock 69. It's the symbol of peace and harmony everyone knows. And then you have the reality of Woodstock 99, a grim, chaotic bookend to the 90s. The big question is, how did that dream get so twisted in just 30 years?
Look, the intention was to throw this massive party to close out the millennium, and they got some of the biggest bands of the time to play. But instead of a cultural milestone, they accidentally set the stage for a war zone. Let's break down the first few ingredients that led to this catastrophe. It all starts with the location. Honestly, the first and maybe the biggest mistake was where they decided to have it. This was no rolling green farm like the original. No, this was a decommissioned Air Force base in Rome, New York. And into this pretty hostile environment, they packed a whole city's worth of people. We're talking 220,000 attendees, all trapped together for a long, hot weekend. The scale was it was massive. And then you add the heat. As you can see here, it was just constant and oppressive. Temperatures soared past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's over 38 Celsius. And this wasn't just a hot afternoon. It was a relentless bake for the entire festival. And this slide really shows you why that heat was so unbearable. The ground was all asphalt and concrete, which basically acted like a giant heat sink, just radiating that temperature right back up at you. There was pretty much no shade anywhere. Oh, and the two main stages? They were separated by a grueling 1.5-mile track across blistering tarmac. I mean, the misery was literally built into the festival from the ground up. Okay, so you have a hot, miserable, and exhausted crowd. What's the next ingredient in our disaster recipe? Well, how about a huge dose of corporate greed and total logistical failure? This is the part where simple discomfort got turned into pure anger. It started with one crucial, absolutely devastating rule. You could not bring your own food or water into the festival grounds. Think about that. This one decision created a captive audience completely at the mercy of the festival's vendors for the most basic human needs. And that, of course, led directly to this predatory pricing. $4 for a single bottle of water. In today's money, that's almost $7.50. A small personal pizza, $12. This stopped being a festival and became an exercise in price gouging a dehydrated, captive crowd. So naturally, people got desperate. I mean, you're facing heat stroke and extortionate prices. What do you do? Well, attendees took matters into their own hands and started breaking open water mains. This flooded the grounds, and that water mixed with the overflowing portable toilets and created a literal swamp. And that brings us to this absolutely grim reality. You know those scenes you might have seen of people gleefully sliding around in the mud? Well, this quote puts it in a much, much darker context. It wasn't mud. It was a biohazard. A toxic stew of dirt and human waste. So let's recap. You've got a hot, angry, dehydrated crowd stewing in filth. The pressure cooker is about to blow. The final ingredient you need? The spark. And that spark was the music itself. They gave them a soundtrack for their rage. The whole musical vibe couldn't have been more different from the original festival. The peaceful folk and psychedelic rock of '69, that was replaced by the angst-ridden, aggressive nu metal of the late 90s. We're talking Korn, Limp Bizkit. The energy was just on a completely different, much angrier planet. And right here, this was the flashpoint. On Saturday night, Limp Bizkit is playing their song Break Stuff, and frontman Fred Durst actively encourages the crowd to unleash all their simmering anger. He basically gave them permission and instruction to let it all out. And they did. The audience responded immediately. The big plywood peace fence that was surrounding the sound tower, it got torn to pieces. People started crowd surfing on the wreckage. This is the exact moment the mood definitively shifted from just frustration to outright destruction. So all of this culminates on the final night. All the anger that had been building and simmering for days finally just boiled over, and the festival reached its absolute point of no return. And here is the ultimate, unbelievable irony of the whole story.
In a genuine attempt to create a moment of peace, an anti-violence group handed out thousands and thousands of candles for a vigil. The idea was to light them during the Red Hot Chili Peppers' closing set. But instead of a vigil, those candles became kindling. Just look at this timeline. You can see how fast it all collapsed. Small bonfires lit with those peace vigil candles quickly grew and spread to vendor tents and even the massive audio towers. It spiraled into a full-scale riot. ATMs were being torn from walls, booths were looted, and finally, state troopers in full riot gear had to be called in to shut the whole thing down. And what was the soundtrack to this apocalyptic scene? You cannot make this stuff up. In a move that is still criticized to this day, the Red Hot Chili Peppers launched into a cover of the Jimi Hendrix classic, Fire. They were literally playing with fire while the festival burned around them. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Woodstock '99 wasn't just a bad weekend. It became a cultural touchstone for all the wrong reasons. It left behind a legacy that's really remembered as a powerful, powerful cautionary tale. The legacy is crystal clear. First, the Woodstock brand was permanently tarnished. Its whole peace and love thing was just replaced with images of destruction. More than that, it became the ultimate cautionary tale of what happens when corporate greed puts profits way ahead of people's safety. It proved you can't just slap a famous name on an event and expect to manufacture magic. Which really leaves us with this one big question. The organizers of Woodstock '99 tried to sell the spirit of a cultural movement. But in the end, by creating an environment of misery, exploitation, and aggression, did they prove that the only thing you can really manufacture are the perfect conditions for a riot